Right. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's 3 o'clock, so we're going to start the third in our series of the Fountainhill Biodiversity Symposium. And today we're focusing on water. For those of you who joined us a bit earlier, I hope you enjoyed our entertaining technical dialogue. We all learn in the world of Zoom. To introduce myself, if you haven't joined us before, my name is Sally Frost. I'm the Public Relations Manager in the College of Agriculture, Engineering and Science at UKZN. And I'm your online host. We're online because of COVID, which means we all have to get our minds around Zoom. So just to give you some pointers, at the bottom left of your screen, you will see a button that says mute. Please mute yourselves. As we're in a Zoom meeting, we had over 500 RSVPs, so please mute yourselves so we don't have background noise. And if you want to save data, push the stop video button, which is right next to that. And then the top right of your screen is a little button called view, where you can toggle between gallery view and speaker view. To view, it's best to have speaker view so that you can see your speakers large and clear. We are being recorded. I will post the recording to you afterwards, which you can share with friends. At the bottom in the middle of your screen is a chat facility. Please use this to post questions to the panelists, and we will filter them and have a discussion once they've finished their presentations. And if by any chance I disappear with electricity outages, then my co-host is Tanya Reinhardt, and she will take over. But otherwise, I think we're ready to start. And so I will hand over to our online host for today, who's Dr. Pearl Gola from SANBI. Pearl, over to you. If you can unmute yourself and show yourself.
Thanks, Sally. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Pearl Gola. I am the Ecological Infrastructure Coordinator for the Greater Umgeni Catchment, the Ecological Infrastructure for Water Security Project at the South African National Biodiversity. I'm very distracted by. So I'll.
Pearl, you're muted.
Sorry about that. So welcome to this third session of our Fountainhill Symposium webinar. This session will focus on the water biodiversity nexus as a contribution to the webinar series on the impact of food, water, and energy on biodiversity. So we know that South Africa is a water scarce country, and the state of our water resources is deteriorating over time. We therefore need to find innovative ways of managing our water resources. And we need to find effective governance systems that will assist us in doing that. And we have realized over time that catchments seem to be the most appropriate level or scale for effective and efficient water resource management and governance. And that's also fully recognized in our National Water Act. So to share experiences in the different roles that they play in the water biodiversity nexus, we have three speakers. We've got Dr. Phumza Ntshotsh from the CSIR. She's based in the Western Cape. We've got Ms. Futhi Vilakazi from Umgeni Water, and she's based here in Pietermaritzburg, KwaZulu-Natal. And then we've got Mr. Bheka Nxele from eThekwini Municipality, who's also based here in KZN. So I won't go through each of their bios because Sally has already done that. She sent out the bios of our speakers this morning. So I won't go through that to save time. Our first speaker is Dr. Phumza Ntshotsh. So I'll hand over to Dr. Ntshotsh to kick us off. Over to you, Phumza.
Thank you, Pearl, for that introduction. Good afternoon, colleagues, and thank you for your time. Just a very brief introduction on who I am. I am a senior researcher at the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research based in Stellenbosch. The research group I am part of is the Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services Research Group, where we do cross-cutting work on the condition of biodiversity and ecosystem services and how nature can support development. Dr. Monet du Plessis did, I'm just going to go into my presentation now, so I'm going to share my screen. How do I go to, there's this window, okay. Please bear with me. Is it showing?
Yes, it is, Phumza.
Okay, yes. Thank you. Dr. du Plessis did a great introduction on, I think it was the 5th when he presented at this webinar. He gave a good introduction on the importance of the biosphere for development. So I'm not going to rehash his talk or go into details about the Sustainable Development Goals, but rather I'll focus on the water component in the development agenda. Among the 17 Sustainable Development Goals that have been set by several nations, SDG 6 focuses on clean water and sanitation. Specifically, this goal is about ensuring the availability and sustainable management of water and sanitation for all. And when we come to the local context, the South African context, the importance of water for development is again recognized in the vision, where it's stated that in 2030, the country's social and economic development will reflect an understanding of and alignment with available water resources. So this just underscores how important water is for the achievement of the development agenda. And water is quite cross-cutting across the different sustainable development goals. Some great work has been done by colleagues at Rhodes University, where they have assessed at the national level just how intricate these interlinkages are between the goals, the targets of SDG 6 and the other sustainable development goals. Just looking at that, you can see it is very intricate. You cannot separate water from any of the other SDGs. There are trade-offs as indicated by the red lines, and there are also synergies. So water works with and well, the achievement of the goals, of the different goals has implications for water and vice versa. But then we need to understand where water comes from. You might have noticed that the topic of my talk is that water does not come from a tap. And indeed, we need to understand that water comes from ecosystems. The entire water cycle is depicted on the picture on the right, and this probably takes you back to your high school days. But the key message here is that bulk infrastructure or gray infrastructure, built infrastructure, is just a component of the entire water provisioning service. And then that brings us to the concept of ecological infrastructure, which is quite important for the provision of water. This is a concept that has been coined in South Africa, specifically by the South African National Biodiversity Institute, and they define ecological infrastructure as naturally functioning ecosystems that generate or deliver valuable services to people. And this is not only unique to the provisioning of water, but different ecosystems provide different services to people, and the ecosystems, those ecosystems that provide those services are referred to as ecological infrastructure. But in the instance of the provision of water, we've got, for example, what we call strategic water source areas in South Africa. These are areas that cover a relatively small percentage of our land mass in South Africa, but they deliver disproportionately high amounts of water for the whole country. The mapping of these strategic water source areas was done and completed by colleagues under the leadership of my colleague, David Lemaitre, and the report was published in 2018. So you can read up on that and the importance of this relatively small area of South Africa that it delivers so much water. I prefer to call these areas our water factories. So it's quite important, and I hope that this underscores the fact that water does indeed, the provision of water depends on the condition of the surrounding ecosystems. And as Pearl referred to it, we need to adopt a catchment perspective when we talk about water. And looking at the condition of water provisioning ecosystems, I just want to touch briefly on the intergovernmental science policy. This thing keeps coming up. The platform on biodiversity and ecosystem services, which is abbreviated as IPBES. This is a body of many governments. It was established in 2012, and it is independent and intergovernmental. It's basically, it was formed to provide timely scientific information to advise policymakers. It is to biodiversity and ecosystem services what the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change is to climate change. So its aim is to provide the scientific evidence necessary to implement robust policies to manage biodiversity and ecosystem services. IPBES has a diverse work program encompassing a global, including a global assessment, which I think it was completed last year. And there have been several regional assessments, including an African assessment on biodiversity and ecosystem services, which was concluded, I think, in 2017. There have also been thematic assessments, including a pollination assessment and a land degradation assessment, values assessment. So it's different assessments, all speaking to the condition of biodiversity and ecosystem services, with the aim of informing policy. And the consistent message coming out of all these assessments is that nature and its vital contributions to people are deteriorating worldwide. So the message is unambiguous. We are in trouble because nature is in trouble. Specifically, the land degradation and restoration assessment quantified just how bad the situation is at a global level. This assessment drilled down into the drivers and the impacts and what can be done to address this global problem. And the message there, or the key messages that came out of the global land degradation and restoration assessment were that land degradation is a global problem faced by every country in every ecosystem type. It is an ongoing and worsening problem. The severity and consequences differ between contexts. And it was also said that it is highly likely that it is the single environmental issue materially affecting the largest number of people presently. I don't know how it weighs up against climate change, but that is not what we are about here. Coming to the national picture, the National Biodiversity Assessment was completed in 2018, led by SANBI in collaboration with some partners as shown on that picture. The message coming out of the NBA is not very different from what the global assessments have said, but this message obviously is specific to the South African context. But what it's showing is that the condition of ecosystems is in a bad state. The map or the picture on the upper right corner, the dark green shading shows areas that are critically, that have been critically converted. Is it conversion? I can't remember the correct term now, but those areas are not in a pristine condition, they are in a degraded condition. And also the NBA showed that the threat status of many ecosystem types is critical, as you can see. I don't know if my cursor is showing on your side, but the bar graphs below the picture specifically show that wetlands, rivers, and estuaries are in a terrible, terrible condition. And this is also reflected in their protection levels, with wetlands being the least well protected among the ecosystem types that were assessed in the biodiversity in the NBA. So the picture is not looking good at all. Our Mother Nature is crying out. Ecosystems are in a terrible state. But the good news is that all is not lost. There is room for improvement. Degradation can be halted and reversed. And the cost of not doing it is much higher than the cost of doing it, because the more it advances, the more it's left unaddressed, the more the cost to society, the cost to development, and yeah, it just escalates. This message came out strongly from the land degradation assessment that the time is now that we need to act. It's critical that we act now so that we can meet the Sustainable Development Goals. And it is quite encouraging to know that the international audience, the policymakers, governments are sitting up, taking notice, listening, and implementing. In fact, to this end, the current decade has been declared the United Nations Decade on Ecosystem Restoration. So it is time to act, and action is taking place. We hope that by the time this decade comes to an end, there will be substantial improvement in the condition of our ecosystems. Obviously, ecosystems take time to respond, but if we act now, we will see the benefits in time. And you can go onto this link and pledge your support. That is all from me. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Phumza. So I think what we'll do is we'll go through all our three speakers, and then we'll take questions afterwards. So our next speaker will be Ms. Futhi Vilakazi from Umgeni Water. Futhi.
Thank you, Pearl. If I can have a right to upload my presentation. Okay, it's allowing me. Okay, good afternoon, colleagues. Hope my screen is showing yet. Please let me know if it's showing.
Yes, it is, Futhi.
Thank you so much for the opportunity from the Fountainhill Estate Symposium, just to afford us an opportunity to be able to share some of our work during the symposium. Just to give a background, for today's presentation, I'm just going to be covering Umgeni Water's position on water resource management and link it to the WEF nexus, as has been presented by the colleagues that have presented in the previous symposiums. So just to give a background, I think in the food theme, Dr. Tafadzwa really provided a good background in terms of what the WEF nexus entails, when he explained that it's a holistical systems approach to governance and management of water, energy, and food resources. He also explained that there are interlinked or interconnections between the three sectors, which is the water, energy, and food nexus, and those needs to be recognized, and the synergies between those needs to be recognized, and we need to ensure that we manage those in an integrated manner. What is very important to recognize for today's presentation is that unless there's buy-in between the three sectors, the water sector, the energy sector, and the food sector, we'll never be able to realize the objectives of the WEF nexus. We'll never be able to effectively implement that integrated approach that is presented by the WEF nexus. And in today's presentation, what I'm going to cover is Umgeni Water's position on water resource management and linking it to the WEF nexus. So as you would know, that Umgeni Water is a water utility within KZN, and we've got a role to play in water resources management. So in today's presentation, I think it's very important for us to share what we have been doing in terms of water resources management and how does that link with the WEF nexus. Since this is a water theme, it's very important to recognize that water is a basic unit of life. And I think the previous speaker also did indicate that water is basically central to the survival of organisms. It's also central to the various sectors that are available. Like we have also shown in the WEF nexus approach that there's water, there's energy, and there's food. And water is intricate to the agricultural sector in terms of food production. It's also central to the energy sector in terms of energy production. But then energy also does play a role in terms of water services or water supply. What we also need to realize is that the water sector has got a very big role to play in terms of water resources management, so that it also plays its role when it comes to the food, energy, water nexus. And unless we understand that, we will then lose the opportunity to take advantages of the synergies that are there between the three sectors that are relevant to this symposium. It's then really important for us to make sure that we also recognize that water is a finite resource, and it then requires us to manage it in a sustainable manner. I hope as I'm changing my slides, they are also changing from your side. Okay, so looking at the water theme, I think it's also very important to take a step back and look at the outlook of the status quo of water and sanitation services at the moment. According to the Water and Sanitation Master Plan of 2018, over 3 million people in South Africa still do not have access to basic water services, and about 14.1 million people do not have access to sanitation services or safe sanitation. Also, about 64% of the households in South Africa lack access to reliable water supply services. And in terms of our water treatment works, 56% of them and 44% of the wastewater, 56% of the wastewater treatment works and 44% of the water treatment works are in poor or critical condition, and 11% are dysfunctional. And more than 50% of South Africa's wetlands, as has been also indicated by Phumza in her presentation, have been lost. And of those that remain, 33% are in a poor ecological status. And we also know the importance of those ecological systems in terms of water supply. And when looking at the agricultural sector and their water use, there's only 5% of the agricultural water that is currently being used by Black farmers. And there's also 41% of municipal water that is currently being lost through non-revenue water, and 35% is lost through leaks. And lastly, 33 billion rand is needed each year for us to be able to achieve water security. Given that background, I think it's also very important to understand that water services are only possible through the water availability at our catchments. So looking at the nature or the quality of our water, or the health of our catchments at the moment, the status is not looking great. And this links back to what Phumza had also presented. Looking at the overall status or health status of catchments, and just looking at the area of operation that is operated by Umgeni Water, we did a high-level assessment in terms of how can we categorize our catchments in terms of the health status. And what you see there is most of our catchments are not in a good status, and that is indicated by the red on those catchments. And most of those catchments are within the Umgeni catchments, the Akhonkomazi catchments, Ntshotsh catchments, and the catchments that are located in the eThekwini Municipality, the Moi catchments. All of those catchments are in a critically modified state, or are in an unsatisfactory state. They are currently modified. And then also looking at the Tugela catchment, the Tugela catchment is not also in a good state. It is in a highly modified state. Also looking at other catchments like the Mzimkhulu catchments, those catchments are modified. What is highlighted in this map is that most of our catchments are highly modified or are not in a good state. And that is a concern because catchments are where our water are coming from. And if our factories, as Phumza had also indicated, are not in a good state, it then also poses a high risk for the sustainability of water supply. This is also confirmed by the overall water requirements at our strategic catchments. This is a study that was done by the Department of Water and Sanitation in 2018, and it indicates that there is currently a shortfall in all of our catchments when it comes to water availability. And you'd see that the ones that are highlighted in red is where there's more deficits when it comes to water availability. And you'd see that the Umgeni catchment is leading with a deficit of minus 90 million cubic meters that is required for that catchment to be able to meet the supply, the demand in the Umgeni catchment. You'd also notice that the Mkomazi catchment, which we are currently going to be using to augment the Umgeni system, is also has got a deficit of 60 million cubic meters per annum, and that is a concern, because this is the catchment that we are also looking into using to augment the main system in our area of operation. Tugela catchment, which includes the Bushman's catchment, also has got a high deficit. But what is important to highlight, in all of the catchments where we are getting our water from in order to ensure water services or water supply are in a high deficit. That was just looking at the water availability. What about water quality status? Again, the picture is also not looking good when it comes to the water quality status. Most of our rivers in our catchments are also in an unsatisfactory condition. What I'm currently showing at the moment is the water quality index that we develop at Umgeni Water, and we report on this on a monthly basis. And this was for the period of 3 months from October to December 2020. And you can see that in the areas that we are monitoring, which includes the various catchments that I had alluded to, the Umgeni catchment, the Mkomazi, the Ntshotsh, that is not a full picture in terms of the catchment scale monitoring, but we're monitoring in the strategic areas that would give us a picture in terms of the water quality in those systems. And you notice that in the Umgeni catchment, sorry, I hope you can see my cursor, but it's located right at the center of that map, where you can see the Pietermaritzburg area and the Msunduzi River and its tributaries are in red. The red simply indicates that the catchment is in an unsatisfactory status. So it means that there's poor water quality in that catchment. And you can also see a number of browns also in that map in various catchments, and those also indicate the poor status in those catchments. And that is related to various factors, including the degradation in the catchments that has happened, the upstream activities that are happening, the sewer, poor maintenance of sewer networks. It could also be attributable to attributed to the rainfall events that may affect the catchments that are downstream, and also what we alluded to earlier when it comes to the ecological infrastructure, such as wetlands that are located in those catchments that are in a poor status. And all of those factors are affected by the population or the people that are living in those catchments, which are also developing in those catchments, and they've got activities that are affecting the water quality in our catchments. But this slide is simply showing us is that our water quality is not really looking good, and that is a concern, because water quality status that is poor is of risk to sustainable water and sanitation services, because it means high treatment cost, which will also lead to unaffordable water to our citizens or to our customers. Okay, so looking at the overview of the water management, water resource management framework in South Africa, we understand that water resource management is the core responsibility or the mandate of the Department of Water and Sanitation through the minister and the Department of Water and Sanitation, who have got the overall responsibility for effective water resource management. But we also do understand that the department alone will not be able to undertake effective water resource management without the help of other sectors or without the help of the different users on the ground. So Umgeni Water's position when it comes to water resource management is to support the Department of Water and Sanitation and the institutions under the departments, such as the catchment management agencies. And we do understand that in our area of operation at the moment, while we have an established catchment management agency, it is not fully operational, and therefore it means that the water resource management at catchment level, the responsibility at catchment level still sits with the Department of Water and Sanitation. So ours, as Umgeni Water Group, and when I'm saying Umgeni Water Group, I mean Umgeni Water and its entity, Umsinti Holdings, that is operating at the various dams in terms of resort management and some of the water resource management functions. Ours is to support the mandate of the department, which is to ensure that water's resources on the ground are protected, managed, and are used efficiently, and also managed in a sustainable manner. This is quite important for Umgeni Water because, as indicated earlier on, for us to be able to deliver on our mandate, which is to provide water and sanitation services to our customers, we'll never be able to realize that responsibility unless the raw water at our catchments is of sufficient amount and sufficient quality or fit for use. Okay, so understanding the status quo in terms of the current state of water resources has indicated that our status are in a poor condition. There are issues when it comes to water availability and water quality. Umgeni Water then took a stance to undertake catchment management as a core function at Umgeni Water, and we established a department that is looking at catchment management. And through this department, we are using an ecological infrastructure management approach, which also uses an integrated approach to water resources management. And we saw this as something that would be fitting because Umgeni Water is known for bulk water and sanitation services, of which has got a component on hard engineered infrastructure that is used in order to ensure the supply of water and sanitation services to customers. So in the picture that you see on the screen, I just wanted to demonstrate our approach to water resource management at Umgeni Water. We've got bulk water infrastructure in terms of engineered infrastructure. We've got dams where we store our water, and we've got water treatment plants where we treat our water, wastewater treatment plants where we treat our wastewater. And that is to ensure the supply of water and sanitation services. But equivalent to that, we've got an opportunity to use the ecological infrastructure, which Phumza had also already provided a definition for when it comes to it being an equivalent to built up infrastructure, because it's those naturally functioning ecosystems that are providing invaluable services to us. So we've got an opportunity to then supplement our engineered solution or our bulk water supply that is currently using engineered solution with ecological infrastructure, such as wetlands and the biodiversity, to ensure that we supplement the water that is available on our catchments. As indicated earlier on, at the moment, we will be supplementing our main catchment, or our biggest catchment in our area of operation, the Umgeni catchment, with the water that will be coming from the Upper Mkomazi. That's an indication that there is a shortage of water, and I've already shown how much water deficit we've got in the Umgeni catchment. But if we were to use the ecological infrastructure or supplement the current water supply with the ecological infrastructure, we will be able to ensure water security and water sustainability. And in that way, we'll be able to ensure sustainable water supply in our catchments. So as Umgeni Water, what we have done is we have, within the Department of Catchment Management, we have developed different management plans for ecological infrastructure management that will ensure that we implement the ecological infrastructure approach to water resource management. And we indicated that it's an integrated approach because in our approach to implement this, we're not only working as Umgeni Water, but we're collaborating with various institutions and various stakeholders. So some of the plans that we've got in place, we've got land use catchment assessment plans, where we assess the status of our catchments, and then in that way we are able to know what interventions would be required in order for us to improve the status of catchments. And those are normally triggered by the poor raw water quality that we normally receive in our water treatment plants. And then we do those assessments, and if we can see that the contributing factors to the poor water quality, what the contributing factors to the poor water quality are, we are then able to identify what interventions needs to be implemented. We also have ecological infrastructure management plans for terrestrial alien invasive management, where in all of our operational areas, we are managing alien invasive plants through clearing them, or even also undertaking an integrated approach where we work with our stakeholders in terms of managing those alien invasive plants. The same applies with the aquatic alien plants, and this poses even a greater risk in our dams, because that is where most of our water is stored. So we've got plans, and we've developed integrated management plans for managing alien invasive plants. And we've done this in an integrated manner because we've included all of the stakeholders that may be located upstream and could be contributing to the problems that we are experiencing downstream in our dams. And we are trying to manage those issues in an integrated manner. We also have soil erosion management plans. The one flagship project that we are currently doing is in the Upper Nkumas, where we are implementing ecological infrastructure interventions for soil erosion management. And that project is being implemented now before the dam even comes into effect, or before it's even constructed, so that we are able to prevent sedimentation of the dam, so that the dam can last longer, and we ensure the water quality issues are also prevented, because that catchment is currently experiencing large-scale erosion. We also have wetland management plans. We identified all of the wetlands within our strategic catchments. We did a high-level assessment of their status, and then identified and prioritized the one that we would need to restore. And this is being done in collaboration with our collaboration partners, so as to ensure that there is sustainability in the initiatives. And this includes also working with communities in the areas where those wetlands are located. We also ensure water use efficiency by ensuring that we comply with Section 21 of the National Water Act. As we are a bulk water service provider, we've got abstractions, we've got discharges, we've got disposals that we do, and we ensure that we comply with the National Water Act. And in that, we also ensure that we avoid the environmental impacts that are associated with our water uses. Umgeni Water also has got a climate change policy that we are implementing through an implementation plan, and that policy recognizes that Umgeni Water is both vulnerable to the impacts of climate change and is also a contributor to the impacts of climate change. And therefore, it provides a framework for the organization to transition to a resilient and a low carbon entity. We've got various statements that cover both mitigation and adaptation, and recognizes the need of ensuring that there are behavioral changes that need to happen in order for that policy to be implemented effectively. Okay, Umgeni Water also, under this catchment management department, also has got initiatives for catchment monitoring using remote sensing, and this we are also doing with our collaboration partners, which includes the Institute of Natural Resources. And then we've got a project that is also promoting a community-based water resources management, where we're going to be developing a business case for Umgeni Water to promote community-based water resource management using citizen science. And we have collaborated with some of our collaboration partners that on this one in their current project, that is Amanzi Etu project, to be a pilot project for this business case. Lastly, Umgeni Water is big on stakeholder management, because stakeholder engagement, because we believe that through stakeholder engagement, that's where we would understand the different issues that are being experienced on the ground in different catchments. And through understanding those issues, we can then come up with integrated interventions where the different partners or different stakeholders can contribute in terms of implementing those. So what we have done is we've developed a number of strategic partnerships with various research institutions, government departments, which includes the Water and Sanitation Department, Agriculture, Environment, Energy, and the energy sectors, and as well as the biodiversity institutions and some of the NGOs. And the idea is to ensure collaboration so that we are maximizing benefits between the knowledge and the skills and the resources the various entities have got, and we channel all of that into improving the status of our catchments. Sorry. Okay, when it comes to stakeholder engagement, attending. Sorry.
Time check.
Okay, so I'm about to finish. This is just showing our representation at the CMFs, and you'd see that in the green catchments, that's where we've got presence. We've also identified areas where there needs to be catchment management forums, because we understand that these forums are very important in terms of ensuring integrated water resource management, and we are engaging the department in terms of establishing those ones. The ones in red are the ones where we currently do not have representation but are in plans of attending, and the ones in orange are where we do not really need to be part of. So these are some of the strategic partnerships that we have in place as Umgeni Water with various stakeholders, and the ones that we are currently in the process of establishing with various entities. And it's very important for us to ensure that these are functioning and are doing some work on the ground, because we would like to use our current plans to ensure that we roll them out to the various catchments and ensure that these catchments gain interventions. And we know that we will never be able to do that alone as Umgeni Water. We need to collaborate with other partners. So just to end off this presentation, I think the various presentations, including this one, has highlighted the importance of water in the food energy wealth nexus, and the importance of the water sector to play its role in ensuring that the wealth nexus is being implemented. We understand that we as an institution and any other institution will never be able to solve the water issues that we've got on the ground, and the importance of strategic partnerships then comes into play, and that's what we've been trying to do as Umgeni Water, to establish various partnerships with various stakeholders in order to ensure that we're implementing the plans that we've got in place. And we're inviting everybody to be part of that, including the communities, and we recognize that everybody has got a significant role to play when it comes to water resource management. Thank you.
Thanks, Futhi. So I'm now gonna hand over to Bheka for the sake of time, and we'll take after this time. Bheka, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I see we still have that presentation. Can you take that down?
Futhi, can you stop sharing?
Is it gone?
No, it's still there. It's gone.
Okay, gone.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Bheka Nxele. I'm just trying to share. Just let me know when you can see my presentation.
We can see it.
Okay. Oh my goodness. Okay, thanks. Yeah, my name is Bheka Nxele. I'm currently with the eThekwini Municipality. I'm going to be talking to you from a slightly different perspective. As a local authority, firstly, we do not have a jurisdiction over aquatic corridors, your rivers, and so on and so forth. The mandate to sort of manage those systems lies with other organs of state, like your Umgeni water and so on. However, in terms of the catchments, we do have a strong focus in terms of ecosystem restoration in the catchment areas. And ecosystem restoration means a number of things. In our case, it's about removing invasive alien plants in those systems, and it's through a targeted approach in that we work on sites that are pre-selected by our department, which is the Environmental Planning and Climate Protection Department. But to do that, we have to engage communities as beneficiaries, or that we employ on our program. Now, this presentation that I'm going to be sharing with you is something that I presented at the 8th World Conference on Ecosystem Restoration, which was held in Cape Town. And if you look at the top of my slide, it says by 2030, eThekwini has got that forecast to be Africa's most caring and livable city. And Dr. Phumza said we are currently entering the decade, which has been declared by UN as an ecosystem restoration decade. So I think eThekwini is trying to align itself with that. And I think for me, it's a beautiful opportunity to be starting something that we can work on towards this the end of this decade, so that at the end of it, we put something to show about it, to say, what did we do in terms of ecosystem restoration? And just before I go into the actual presentation, I want to highlight a few things. In terms of ecosystem restoration, there are 4 pillars that ecosystem restoration is trying to achieve. One is to improve native or indigenous biodiversity conservation. We need to be mindful of that. Secondly, it's trying to improve human livelihoods. It's also trying to empower local people, and it's also trying to improve ecosystem services or ecosystem productivity. So let's keep that in mind as we go through this. Because I'm going to be talking to you about engaging communities to make a meaningful contribution towards restoration. And to do that, we believe that if we can name these invasive alien plants in indigenous languages, or in the language that people speak, they will be able then to make meaningful sense. To do this, we chose eThekwini within KZN. And here, most people speak isiZulu. So in our case, the indigenous language that we used was isiZulu. So as we employ people, like I said, in terms of the programs that we have, we employ those isiZulu speakers. And through the approach of poverty alleviation, that's SDG number 1, which talks to combating poverty, and community resilience, which is SDG number 11, which talks to sustainable cities and sustainable communities. We employ those people to work on our programs, and we remember that they are from disadvantaged backgrounds. Now, coming from a disadvantaged background, it means a number of things, but I'm not going to go into that. We all know what it means. And fourthly, in the province of KZN, there's a huge reliance on medicinal plants. Even now, as we're going through COVID, people are using Artemisia cafra, which is umhlonyane. They're using eucalyptus for steaming and so on and so forth. People do believe in medicinal plants. Now, you will appreciate that as people use medicinal plants, there will be an accidental use of invasive alien plants. I know there is deliberate usage, but let's talk about the accidental. The accidental may come through a number of reasons. It could be lack of knowledge, people not knowing that the plant they're using is not indigenous. Or it could be misidentification. People were aiming for an indigenous plant, but they couldn't find it because of scarcity, and they end up using a plant that was not intended. So you can imagine if you are a traditional healer and you send your multi-gatherer to go and collect some plants for you, and the multi-gatherer goes up there and it comes back with a bark from an invasive alien plant. That's a problem which conflicts with the tradition that we apply. To try and put things into context, like I've said, that there's this inappropriate use. People do not live with things they do not know. As they have invasive alien plants or invasive alien species within their space, they name them. And now the naming process might be influenced by what the plant or the species resembles. So it might resemble something that they already know, and they call it that. If you're looking for Orchidia bulata, which is uMngeni, you find something that looks like it, you're not going to be going back and asking what this plant is. You'll just call it uMngeni, and that comes through as that particular plant. So that dilutes our culture, our language, and so on and so forth. In terms of where we are now, there's a strong focus in the management of invasive alien species, which requires partnerships. That is SDG number 17, which talks to formulation of partnerships in order to achieve the SDG goals and so on. It also motivates for coordination so that people know what the other is doing, and sharing of information and so on and so forth. And there's a need for training. As we're controlling these species, there's need for training to identify what species need to be controlled and how to control them. But our strong focus here is that people, as people are engaged in terms of controlling the species, the focus must not only be on what needs to be controlled and how to control, but also on why are we doing this. People must know that. So that even if they leave the program, they must leave with something tangible to say, I understand why the project is in place. It's to achieve this and that. So our proposal then is unwanted plants should have negative names. As people name them randomly, they give them positive names or names similar to indigenous plants and so on. So we're saying that the naming must be structured and names of unwanted plants must be negative. I'll just quote a few plants. We've got Lilium formosa, which is called Formosa lily. It sounds neutral, if not positive. I don't know what is wrong. I mean, Formosa lily could be anything, but it doesn't say there's something wrong with the plant. We just say we're destroying lilies, and I don't understand why. There is Passiflora edulis, which is known as passion fruit. If anything, that's a loud portion right there. It's a positive plant. To make it worse, we have Elianthus altissima, which is the tree of heaven. How positive is that? Can you imagine them sending people out to destroy the tree of heaven? People, yeah, let's review all of those things and make sure that unwanted plants have negative names. Some of you will remember about 10 years ago, there was a paper published by Rockstrom and them, which identified 9 planetary boundaries, and it highlighted the fact that biodiversity had overshot the safe operating space. That paper went on to talk about ecosystem services, which Dr. Phumza also spoke about. The definition used by the United Nations is these are benefits that humans, not some humans, but all humans derive from the natural environment. I know this definition, I've got a problem with it because it's a bit anthropocentric, but let's not take that away the fact that it talks about what humans make of the environment, not some, but all humans. Our constitution says everyone has a right to an environment that is not harmful to their well-being. So the question could be, then who must create and maintain that environment? For as long as there's somebody to create and maintain that environment, it means somebody else will explore it and complain if it's not properly maintained. But the minute we realize that we all have a role to play in managing the environment, then we realize that we all have a role. Then we need to form partnerships, share knowledge, and so on and so forth. As we do that, the question becomes, are there no barriers that hinder other people to take part, meaningful part, in the management of our environment? Let's talk more about these invasive alien plants. You will appreciate that in most cases, these plants have an English common name and or a Latin name, scientific name. That's what they're known by. So if we employ people from disadvantaged backgrounds, people maybe were not fortunate to go to higher learning institutions and so on, and we speak to them in their language, in this case, we speak to them in isiZulu, but when it comes to these plants, we have to lapse because they do not have isiZulu name. So that person might have an internal situation where they feel like this is not for me, it's for them. So I'll just do it as they tell me how to do it, and I'll do it where they tell me to do it. But if it were in their language and they understood completely, that might enable them to contribute and make suggestions and motivations in terms of, let's not focus on only here, but let's even go over there and so on. So the question we are asking is, as we take these people from disadvantaged backgrounds and we put them on the system, on these sites to control invasive alien plants, with that fact of there were some gaps where they were left out because we had to lapse and use other languages and so on, creating the disparity between the actors or the beneficiaries and the system that needs to be restored. Even if we take them to site and point out the plants that need to be removed and so on and so forth, are we truly empowering those communities? Are we truly enabling them to make a meaningful contribution in the control, in the management of our ecosystems? That's the question you're asking. And we do believe that language, if you pay close attention, is a communication barrier. So our objectives were to advocate for the naming of invasive alien plants in indigenous languages, mostly because we're using these people to manage our systems. So if you want me to take part and contribute, speak my language. And if you speak my language, I'll line up with you twice as fast. The naming must be systematic. Give negative plants or unwanted plants negative names, not positive names. There's your Elianthus altissima, which is the tree of heaven. Huge confusion. We also need to review existing names because people have lived with these invasive alien plants and they've called them something. And we need to look at those closely to say, what are you calling it? Is it not confusing what an invasive alien plant with an indigenous one? I once presented to Amakosi here in Durban. And one of the Nkosis said to me, are you telling me, Bheka, that wattle, Acacia menzae, is an invasive alien plant? I said, yes, it is invasive. And he said to me, but I was born here. This plant was here. My father was a king here. The plant was here. And why are you telling me it's an invasive? I said, these plants came here a long time ago. You must look at the house crows. House crows were introduced in East Africa around 1897. So these species have been around. In fact, we framed our cultures around them. In the Zulu culture, if there's a funeral, we use menzae for the logs that are put above the coffin. If we're building houses, we use menzae largely. If for firewood, we're relying on menzae and so on and so forth. So there's been cultural dependence on invasive alien plants. We also need to facilitate that the naming process and the adoption of these species. So wherever we can identify an opportunity, let the sort of reviewed names be used so that we gradually move away from the confusion we create between invasive and indigenous plants. So the work that we did here, as you can see, my co-authors, was published. So I'm just going to tell you how did we go about doing this. Now, in the province of KZN, if you look like in the middle of the province, there's Tugela River. Now, if you cross the Tugela River, the isiZulu that is spoken north of the Tugela River is very different to isiZulu that is spoken in the south. So we were fortunate to have members within this forum, this committee, who are from across the province, because that would take into account the regional differentiation in isiZulu. We've got people from the north of KZN, we've got people from the south. So we put them all together. Now, to name the plants or to suggest names, we looked at the growth form, the phenotypes. We also looked at where do they grow, are they terrestrial, are they aquatic plants? We also looked at the most dominant negative impacts or effects of that particular plant. Now, once we had done that, we had numerous community engagements spanning a few years, where we were engaging different communities within a eThekwini municipality to find out, do you know what this plant is? What do you call it? And why is it called that? And so on and so forth. Where names did not exist, that's where we came up with new names. Just to show you a few highlights that came as a result of this interaction. Your Liebeck tree or Albizia Liebeck is called Usolo, whereas there's Albizia atentiafolia, which is an indigenous plant going by the same name. We also have Adenopholis spicata, which is called Ubobo Olncane. Same name also used for Caesalpina decapitata. And you also see that Adenopholis spicata is also in other regions, it's called Ubobo, whereas Leucaena leucocephala is called the same name. And worst of all, we have Wabeka salutaris, which is an indigenous plant called Isipaha, but people are also using the same name for Schinus terebinthifolius. Now, in terms of the resolutions, remember Caesalpina decapitata was called Ubobo Olncane. We reviewed and said that must be changed. It must be called uMngeni. Now, the reasoning behind is because this particular plant has got thorns and it forms these impenetrable thickets which restrict access. So that's why we came up with the name of uMngeni. Vimba is to prevent or to restrict, and ameva are thorns. Parthenium was called something like Sandanezo, which elsewhere is used for cromolina and so on. So we said, call it Umbulalazwe. We went through like 112 plants that we reviewed. Now, finally, we came up with the protocol for how to go about naming invasive alien plants. One, you need to establish like a committee or a team. you need to identify the material that needs to be reviewed or named or processed. Before you go any step with that, check if it's not already been published elsewhere so that you minimize chances of confusion. Now, once you've got a list that you need to work on or that you're going to work on, do not be tempted to publish that. You must go back to at least where you sampled and engage communities to say, this is what we want to do for these reasons, and these are the names we're proposing, or what names would you like to suggest. Once you've got the names, review your processes and go back to the consultation to test the names that you now have come up with. And at least go that numerous times before you finalize your revision and you publish. Now, when you publish, remember you're targeting two schools of thought. One is the scientific community, the other one as the beneficiaries or the communities who will not be using or accessing your scientific literature. So you must have something in a format that is palatable with their communities. In this case, we are proposing posters. Have posters. A poster is nice because it can have a picture and the English name, the scientific name, and the isiZulu or the indigenous name that you are proposing. Now, I've put a star there next to consultation B because for us, something came out of the particular process. We were reviewing PSTIA in our engagement with the communities, and we did not know what it was called or what name. It didn't have a name. So as we were about to give it a name, one woman raised her hand and said, no, I know this plant, but I've forgotten what it's called. Would you please allow me to go back and ask her mother, who would at the time would have been a very old lady. So we said, it's fine, go back and ask the grand woman. And she went back, and I think it took about maybe 3 weeks or a month. And then she came back to us to say, now I know what it is. It's called Indwane. Now in isiZulu, for those who are Zulu speakers, there is a saying that goes, when a river is full, it's umfula udla izindwane. It means the river is gobbling pistias in essence. It's a Zulu saying, but how amazing that the saying has an invasive alien plant in it, which means that the invasives and the cultures are intertwined because of the lack of awareness as to what these are. So as we clear them, it creates another confusion to say, but we also now are attacking our language. So what are our future goals here is to publish a book out of the names that we've reviewed, to conduct more community engagements to create awareness, and to make sure that these names are used. Like in eThekwini, we've got a poster called Beautiful But Dangerous Posters, which highlights invasive alien plants. It currently has English common names as well as the scientific names, and now in the process of adding isiZulu names. Just as an aside, we had a cup of tea with, I had a cup of tea with Jessica Coburn a few years back, and we were discussing some of the challenges that we are encountering in terms of ecosystem restoration. And we came up to realize that even conservation terminology that is used, we use it so loosely, but the man on the ground, the man on the street does not understand what these are. When you talk about ecosystem services, what are these in isiZulu? We don't have a name for it. Biodiversity, ecological processes, we don't have those things in isiZulu. So as we engage these communities trying to make sense and to empower our communities, we realize that language is a barrier. So even the conservation terminology also needs to be reviewed, translated, or come up with new names so that people can make full sense of what we're trying to achieve and why we want to achieve this. And our plea to DEF, back then when I presented this, it was dear, was that we need to facilitate the naming of invasive alien plants in all languages, at least here in South Africa, so that everyone, Afrikaans-speaking people, Xhosa-speaking, Sotho-speaking, everyone must know what we are trying to achieve. We must not sit with information whereas our communities do not have it, because we end up planning for them instead of planning with them, just because they are left aside because of the language barrier. Finally, I would like to thank these people that we worked with in this process, my co-authors, and those who just contributed, but were not authors and so on, as well as our organizations who are our employers for allowing everyone to be part of this process. I think I forgot to add Prof. Ngubane from UKZN in this list here, but those are the people who contributed, and also the Sabeliwe guys. And if I can just steal a quote from Gary Snyder, who said, "Nature is not a nebulous idea. It's not something far away. It's our home. It's where we live. We need to look after it. And to look after it, we need to speak that one language and understand what we're doing." Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Bheka, and thank you to all our speakers. Unfortunately, I have a very unstable network. So I'd like, because we run out of time, what we'll do is we'll just get all our three speakers to give us a 30-second, thought, bearing in mind the questions that were posed in the chat. And we'll start with Phumza because I am aware that she has to go soon.
Thank you, Pearl. And I apologize that I need to rush, but in closing, I would just like to thank all the participants, and especially considering that we are severely out of time. But what I would like to say is that taking care of nature and making a contribution is not the responsibility of so-called stakeholders. Who are the stakeholders? Each and every one of us has a role to play, and I would like to challenge everyone to just be aware and play their role wherever they can. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Phumza, and thank you for participating in this session. And now I'll hand over to Futhi. Futhi, if you have like a 30-second thought of it.
Thank you, Pearl. Unfortunately, I'll not be able to go over the questions that were raised, but I'm going to try and answer some of them on the chat. I did notice that there was a question around the parameters that we are monitoring or using remote sensing. At the moment, we are doing a feasibility study, but it has got a pilot, and the parameters that will cover includes water quality monitoring, invasive plants, but we are hoping to also look at the feasibility for monitoring land use change as well as alien invasives at a larger scale. Just on the thought of this presentation, of this symposium today, I think it's for me to just thank everybody who was here to listen to us, and for us to be able to share some of our initiatives that we are currently doing. And again, it's just to invite everybody to have a role in their plans, where they are in their institutions, to have a role when it comes to protecting and managing water resources. And we are open to different collaborations with different partners. And I know there was a question around the partnerships with the agricultural sector. Yes, we are working on that. We've recently presented at the KZN legislature at the portfolio committee for agriculture, where we invited them to collaborate with us, because we realized that they contribute to the impacts on water resources management through water quality and quantity, since they are our biggest water users. So we will be collaborating with them. So I'm just going to end there for now, because I was given 30 seconds.
And Mr. Nxele, your parting thought?
Thanks once again, Chair, and also to Fountainhill for the opportunity to present our work. I think from my side, it's just to stress the fact that nature is for all of us, and we need nature and nature needs us. As much as our ecosystems are degraded and they need intervention in terms of restoration, people are also frustrated, confused, and we cannot address one by overlooking the other. To address people issues, you must look after environment. To address the environment, you must be concerned about what people are. That's why people come to a point where they say, why is this particular frog or that species more important than me? Why are those vegetation types more important that you're worried about them rather than us, and so on? Because we need to take the two together. It's not separate. It's not either or. The American Army has got a beautiful motto which says, leave no man behind. And I believe we need to look at the barriers that exclude other people and undo those barriers, so that everyone can take part in ecosystem restoration for our own livelihoods. but also not forgetting the fact that biodiversity has an intrinsic value. It's important to itself, it's important for itself. So let's not make it too much about humans. It's balancing life, balancing the systems. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Bheka. Thank you to all our speakers this afternoon. And now I'll hand over to Sally, and I would like to really thank Fountainhill for giving us the opportunity to lead this session on water. And over to you, Sally.
Thanks very much, Paul. And thank you, speakers. Thank you to our audience for your very lively chat. I will send a recording of this session to everybody, along with the slide presentations and a transcript of the chat. So please join us for the final discussion on energy in 2 weeks' time. And otherwise, enjoy your evening and goodbye. Thank you.
Goodbye, and thank you, Sally. Thank you, everyone.